Research has shown that if you write down your goals, you're much more likely to achieve them. So to get the garden you really want, write down your gardening goals. It's Alexandra here from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog. And I've identified some popular gardening goals to get you started. And I've also picked out some reasons why you might not achieve them, so that you don't fall into those traps. There are basically two kinds of gardening goals. There's project-based gardening goals and there are strategic gardening goals. And in popular project-based gardening goals, that includes make a compost heap, grow more fruit and veg, finally clear that cluttered corner that's just turned into a dumping ground, or completely revamp your garden because your lifestyle has changed. For example, your children have left home or you've suddenly started a family. Strategic gardening goals are things like make your garden more wildlife friendly, make your garden more sustainable, make your garden lower maintenance, and also save water in the garden. So let's start with making a compost heap. Every time I researched how to find gardening goals, the first thing that seemed to come up was make a compost heap. And that's of course because it's a great goal to have. It means you can recycle all your garden clippings and some of your kitchen waste and turn it into really nutritious compost for your garden. So you'll be buying less compost, although it's very difficult for any garden to make as much compost as it really needs without having to buy some in. So what could possibly stop you? Personally, I think it's because there's confusing and contradictory information about making compost out there. When I first started making compost, I really couldn't understand why some people said to me, oh, you've got to have exactly the right proportion of brown material like paper and cardboard and wood to green material like leaves and other garden clippings. And other people said, oh, I just throw anything in there. Oh, I throw t-shirts in there, cotton t-shirts, woolen jumpers. I was thinking, well, how can these two be the same? And they're not the same. The main thing is there are two kinds of composting. There's cold composting, which I call easy composting, and there's hot composting, which I call fast composting. So when someone's telling you about how to do composting, they may not be talking about the kind of composting that you're doing. There are also other kinds of composting, such as worm composting. So it's important to look at the different kinds of compost and decide what's right for you. I've got a video here on easy composting or cold composting because that's the kind I do. So I'll put that in the description below and also in a playlist at the end where I'm pulling together all the gardening goal videos. The next gardening goal is to finally clear that corner that's turned into a dumping ground. And here where I'm sitting was exactly such a corner. So what would stop you doing that? Well, I can tell you what stopped me doing it, and that was a feeling of overwhelm. It just got so piled up and cluttered. And the way I broke it down was to chunk it down. In other words, to take the jobs and to divide them up and only to do one section at a time. And you can do this in two ways. You can either do it in time, set your timer for 15 minutes, do exactly 15 minutes clearing, stop then, come back, do another 15 minutes later on. You'll be amazed at how quickly you manage to get it done. Or the other thing is you do it, chunk it down by job and say, well, everything that's got to go to the local public waste tip, we're going to take that on Saturday. Everything where we need to find a new home for it, we're going to arrange that on Sunday, and so on. But the biggest and most important thing is make sure you know what you're going to do in that cluttered corner, because if you just leave it as an empty space, it'll turn back into a dumping ground awfully quickly. It took me ages to work out what to do with this space, and in the process I did a video called 10 options for a difficult shady corner and 2 to avoid, so that might spark off some ideas for you, and I'll add that in the description below or at the playlist at the end. The next goal is transform your space. Perhaps you've started a family and you need more of a family garden, or your children are now growing up and you need more of an adult private haven or somewhere you can socialise with friends. What could stop you? I think it's proper planning that's most likely to cause the problem. Even if you've been living in your home for years, try and step back and look at it as if it was a completely new garden to you. List what you want to do in the garden, list what you'd like to see when you look out of the windows or go out of the back door, and list what you'd like to see as you look back towards the house from the garden. On the Middlesized Garden, I often interview top garden designers, and there are 2 videos that will particularly help you with a complete revamp of your garden. And that's one about the basics of garden design with Pollyanna Wilkinson, and the other is 5 garden design tips and 2 mistakes to avoid with Charlotte Rowe and Tomoko Kawauchi. And I'll put those in the description below and at the playlist at the end. Now, one garden goal that I set myself every year, and I'm afraid I fail every year, so you can learn from my failures rather than my successes, and that's grow more veg. I think this is another really popular gardening goal, and that's because it's just fantastic to be able to treat your garden as a kind of extension of your larder. So what could stop you being successful in growing fruit and veg? Personally, I think it's lack of time. You'll note I haven't said lack of space and I haven't said lack of knowledge. You can grow fruit and veg on a balcony. For example, the Cloud Gardener is a YouTuber who's very successfully grown fruit on a balcony 18 floors up in Manchester. And as for knowledge, there are lots of fantastic fruit and veg growing channels that I can recommend to you. Try Charles Dowding, Hugh Richards, Tanya at Lovely Greens, Liz Zorab at By the Farm and several others. I'll put all that in the description below. But the reason why I say lack of time could stop you is that vegetables need more regular attention than an ornamental flower garden does. That's not necessarily a negative. For some people, you can do a hard day's work and then 15 or 20 minutes or 10 minutes in the veg garden at the end of that is really reviving. But for other people, it just doesn't fit in with the way they garden. So what about strategic gardening goals? One garden goal a lot of us are aiming for now is to make our gardens more wildlife friendly. And the first step in that is to give up using chemical pest control sprays. Wildlife basically need 4 things in a garden. They need shelter, they need access, they need food and water. And I've got a video about that which I will add to the playlist. So what could stop us getting a wildlife friendly garden? I think the main thing is worrying about pests eating our plants. I think we all know that if we get 3 compliments and 1 criticism, it's the criticism we remember. And when we go out into our gardens, it's exactly the same. Our friends will see the lovely flowers and plants we've grown, but we'll see the nibbled hosta leaves and the aphids on the roses. But the thing about having a wildlife-friendly garden is that you allow the pests to build up, and that brings in their predators, and that keeps the numbers down. So you will always lose a percentage, but it will tend to be quite a fixed percentage. And if your garden is full of plants and flowers, you won't notice those few nibbled leaves, the odd snail here and there, or the aphids on the roses. When I interviewed head gardener Neil Miller at Hever Castle about growing roses, and they've got a fabulous rose garden there, he said that in around June the roses are covered in aphids, but they just keep their nerve, and 3 weeks later all the birds are trotting around looking very well fed, and they've eaten the aphids off the roses. I tried this myself with the dahlia, and it was just covered in aphids in about July. I did nothing. I tried to make my garden as wildlife friendly as possible. 3 weeks later, there were no aphids left on that dahlia. The next one is I'd like a more sustainable garden. Now this is a really big topic. So what could stop you making your garden more sustainable? I think it's getting too hooked on one particular aspect of sustainability. There are lots of aspects to sustainability. There's peat-free compost, there's making your own compost, there's using water better in the garden, there's planting native plants, there's making your own organic homemade fertilisers, and I've got a video on that which I'll put in the description below. And it makes it much easier to understand it if you do approach one topic at a time. But if you get completely hooked on just one aspect of it, you're likely to lose the balance, and balance is an incredibly important part of sustainability. And I think we can see this most clearly in lawns. In some parts of the world, lawns are not sustainable. They need too much water, too much fertiliser, too much attention, and they're not planted with native grasses. And research has come out to show that, and they get called green deserts. But that doesn't mean that lawns in other parts of the world are not fully sustainable. We went to interview David Hedges-Gower of the Lawn Association, and as he points out, lawn grasses are plants, and one of the most sustainable things you can do in your garden is to plant as many plants as possible. A lawn here in the UK and in many parts of Northern Europe and North America, it absorbs heat, it absorbs pollution, it offers a habitat for wildlife. Even if you mow your lawn regularly, you will see birds pecking worms out of it. And if you allow it to grow a little bit longer and to flower occasionally, then that's a great thing for pollinators. You don't have to water a lawn except in the first year after it's planted. After that, if you're living in a part of the world where lawns are sustainable, the lawn will go brown, but that's because it's going dormant, it's not dying. And when the rains come, it'll spring back. So water use isn't an issue. You can let parts of the lawn grow up in order to feed pollinators, or you can do mowing less often, or you can actually have a really nice smartly mown lawn but an incredibly biodiverse pollinator friendly border. So it's all about what's right for your part of the world, what's right for you. Otherwise you get into this nutty situation where there was a council apparently in the States somewhere where lawns weren't sustainable, and so they paid residents to take their lawns out and to put plastic lawns in instead. And that is nuts, because there is nowhere in the world where an artificial lawn is sustainable. It's made with petrochemicals, it only lasts 10 years, so it goes to landfill. It has to be clean, so you have to go on using water even in a drought. There is no wildlife benefit whatsoever, and it's expensive, particularly compared to a bag of lawn seed. So don't get too hooked on one particular aspect. Just remember that it's about where you live, what your lifestyle is, what sort of garden you want, and working out sustainability from there. The next gardening goal is make your garden more low maintenance. If you're very short of time, you're very busy, or if you're struggling with any health problems, then it's really important to have a lower maintenance garden, because your garden needs to work for you as well as you working for the garden. What's the main thing that could stop you having a low maintenance garden? Well, personally, I think it's guilt. You may be feeling guilty that you don't want to do all those jobs, but you don't have to do them. If you have easy care perennials and shrubs rather than annuals, that'll be less work. If you do no dig, and I've got a video for no dig for flower gardens, which I'll put in the description below and in the playlist at the end, then that'll mean less digging, and it usually means a bit less weeding as well. There's no such thing as a no maintenance garden, but with a little careful planning you can reduce what you do. So saving water in the garden, that's a good gardening goal. Certainly in the UK and many other parts of the world we had a really hot, dry summer last year. And so of course we're all thinking more about drought tolerant planting, but the summer before for us certainly was very wet. So I think we need to think more about resilient plants than drought tolerant plants. But what could stop you really achieving a good saving of water in the garden? As soon as you start to research saving water in the garden, someone will tell you that you need to buy a water butt or a rain barrel, like this one here. But that's such a small part of saving water in the garden. An average water butt or rain barrel will really only give you about a week's water at most. So if you're having a month or a 2-month drought, it's not going to be much help. If you can get a really large water butt or rain barrel, or put 2 or 3 together so that they run into each other, then that's much more helpful. And if you could reroute the guttering in your home so that it goes into a proper rainwater harvesting system, then that is great too. We interviewed somebody last year called Anne Vincent who rerouted the rainwater from her guttering into making a pond in her garden, and that's a really lovely way of doing it. But focus on how you water plants in the garden. You don't need to water all plants, for example. Vegetables usually need watering, and some plants, if they're newly planted, will need watering, but a lot of plants in the garden, once they've got their roots down, don't need regular watering. Pots will always need watering. I went to a talk by gardening author Christine Warpton this year, and she said don't water your plants every day. If you do have plants that need regular watering, water them 2 or 3 times a week, but water them really thoroughly around the roots. So that's giving them possibly up to a whole watering can of water. And you can do the same with pots. Water them 2 or 3 times a week, but water them really well. Of course, if you can invest in an irrigation system, that'll be a much more precise use of water. But above all, don't sprinkle water. And by that I mean don't use a sprinkler or a very fine rose which goes all over a border or all over leaves. What you want to do is to direct the water to where it's needed and not to anywhere else. And so that'll be around the roots of the plants and it'll be on the ground. And certainly don't water the lawn. So if you want to find out more about achieving any of these garden goals, then there's a playlist, Garden Goals playlist, at the end of this video. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.